summer of my 13th year felt endless. My friends and I decided to cap it off with one last camping trip before school started. We chose a remote site near the edge of Millstone Woods, a place infamous for its eerie rumors and ghostly legends. It seemed like the perfect backdrop for a weekend of adventure and a touch of fear. We loaded up my father's old truck with tents, flashlights, and enough food for a small army. There were 4 of us: Jake, Sarah, Tommy, and me. Our hearts raced with excitement as we bounced along the dirt road leading to the woods, completely dismissing the sinister stories that surrounded the area. The campsite was a small clearing encircled by towering trees, their silhouettes casting long, shadowy fingers as the sun began to set. We pitched our tents and built a campfire, the flames flickering and dancing as we settled around it. The warm light painted our faces as we took turns telling ghost stories, each one more exaggerated than the last. "There's a tale about a woman who went missing in these woods," Jake said, his voice dropping to a dramatic whisper. "They say she wanders at night, searching for her lost child. If you hear her calling, you're supposed to run, or you'll be taken too." Sarah rolled her eyes, but a shiver ran down my spine. The weight of the encroaching darkness pressed around us. "It's just a story," I said, trying to sound braver than I felt. Still, I couldn't shake the unease creeping through me. As the night wore on, we roasted marshmallows and laughed. But when the stories ran dry, the conversation turned to our fears. "I'm not scared of the dark," Tommy bragged, but his eyes betrayed him, darting nervously toward the tree line. Jake smirked. "Then let's prove it. Midnight hike. Who's in?" "No way." Sarah crossed her arms. "That's just asking for trouble." But Jake was relentless, and with a mix of peer pressure and bravado, we eventually agreed. Armed with a single flashlight, we ventured into the woods. The beam of light cut a narrow path through the trees as the forest swallowed us. The deeper we went, the colder the air grew, and the lively chatter faded into an unsettling silence. Twigs snapped beneath our feet, and the leaves rustled faintly above, as though the forest were holding its breath. "Did you hear that?" Sarah whispered, stopping abruptly. I strained my ears but heard nothing beyond the wind. "It's just the trees," I said, though my voice trembled. We pressed on, the oppressive atmosphere thickening with each step. Then we stumbled into a clearing bathed in pale moonlight. At its center stood a dilapidated cabin, its walls cloaked in vines and its roof sagging under decades of decay. "Let's check it out," Jake said, eyes gleaming with excitement. "Are you crazy?" Sarah hissed. "What if someone lives there?" But deep down, we all knew the truth. This cabin wasn't just abandoned. It felt forsaken. Against my better judgment, I followed Jake as he pushed the door open, creaked loudly, like a warning. The air inside was thick and musty, carrying the sharp scent of decay. Our flashlight beams revealed dusty furniture, shattered windows, and long-forgotten remnants of a life once lived. "Cool," Jake whispered, stepping inside. The floor groaned under his weight. I hesitated, but curiosity pulled me over the threshold. A sudden chill wrapped around me, prickling my skin. It felt as though the cabin itself had exhaled, welcoming us into its haunted embrace. In one room, I noticed an old rocking chair. The paint was peeling and the wood was warped. As I reached out to touch it, a faint vibration rippled under my fingers, like a heartbeat. I jerked my hand back. "Let's get out of here," Sarah urged, her voice shaking. "Just a few more minutes," Jake insisted, heading for the rickety staircase. Reluctantly, we followed. The second floor was darker, the air heavier, as though it bore the weight of countless secrets. In one room, we found a dusty old trunk. "What's inside?" Jake asked, already prying it open. "Probably just junk," I muttered, though I felt an inexplicable pull toward it. Inside were old photographs, yellowed with age, of a woman and her child. Their eyes seemed to follow us, sorrowful and haunting. My chest tightened with an overwhelming sadness. "We need to leave," Sarah said firmly. But before we could act, a loud bang echoed from downstairs. We froze, fear coursing through us. "What was that?" Tommy whispered, his face pale. "I don't know," I said, my heart hammering. "But we need to leave." As we turned toward the stairs, a soft, mournful voice floated through the air. "Help me, please." I stopped, my blood running cold. "Did you hear that?" I gasped. Everyone nodded, their faces drained of color. "It's coming from downstairs," Jake whispered. His earlier bravado was gone. "We should leave," Sarah urged, her voice trembling. But the voice came again, louder, more desperate. "Help me. I'm lost." Against every instinct screaming at me to run, I descended the stairs. The others followed reluctantly. The cabin seemed alive, its walls closing in as the atmosphere grew heavier. In the main room, the door slammed shut with a deafening boom. The windows rattled violently. "You must help me," the voice pleaded, now closer, laced with sorrow. Shadows swirled, coalescing into a figure. A woman with hollow eyes and a face etched with anguish. "My child," she whispered. "Help me find her." The room grew impossibly cold. The shadows seemed to reach for us, twisting and writhing like living things. "Run!" I shouted, grabbing Sarah's hand. We bolted for the door, but the forest outside had transformed. The trees loomed closer, their branches clawing at us like skeletal fingers. The whispers returned, rising in a haunting chorus. "Help us! Help us find her." We sprinted through the woods, hearts pounding, until the faint glow of our campsite came into view. Relief washed over me as we reached the truck, scrambling inside and peeling away. But as the cabin disappeared into the distance, the whispers lingered, echoing in my mind. "Help us! Help us!" Weeks passed, but I couldn't escape the memories. Then, one day, I stumbled upon a newspaper article. "Missing girl found." The tragic story of Millstone Woods. A child had vanished in those woods decades ago, and her mother, desperate to find her, had disappeared shortly after. The article claimed her spirit still wandered, searching endlessly. I realized then that we hadn't just encountered a ghost story. We had stumbled into a tragedy, and the whispers of Millstone Woods weren't echoes of fear but cries for help. To this day, when the nights grow quiet, I still hear them. "Help us, find us." And I wonder if I'll ever truly escape the ghosts of that final campout. It started about 6 months ago when I decided to rent out the basement apartment in my house. The extra income was nice, and most of the tenants I'd had over the years kept to themselves. The last guy was a little odd, quiet, distant, but he paid his rent on time and didn't cause any trouble. At least that's what I thought. One day he left without warning. No note, no goodbye. He didn't even come back to collect his security deposit. I found it strange but figured he must have had his reasons. Maybe a job offer in another city or a sudden personal emergency. People move for all sorts of reasons. I let it go and relist the apartment. The new tenant, Aaron, seemed normal enough at first. He was in his mid-30s, clean-cut, and polite. He didn't have much in the way of belongings, just a few boxes and a mattress, which he dragged down into the basement himself. After that initial meeting, I barely saw him. He wasn't the chatty type, but I didn't mind. I wasn't looking for a new friend, just someone to help pay the bills. But then things started to feel off. It began with the sounds. Late at night, when the house was still and the neighborhood was quiet, I'd hear a faint scraping noise coming from the basement. At first, I assumed Aaron was rearranging furniture, maybe trying to get comfortable in his new place. But the noise didn't stop. Came at odd hours, 2 a.m., 3 a.m., long after anyone should be awake. It wasn't a hurried sound, but a slow, deliberate dragging, like something heavy being pulled across the floor. I told myself it was nothing. Maybe he worked late shifts or had insomnia. But no matter how much I tried to rationalize it, the unease crept in, little by little. Then came the smell. It wasn't constant, but every so often, a faint, acrid scent wafted up through the vents. It smelled metallic, sharp, almost like rust or old blood. Alarmed, I checked my own basement storage area, thinking there might be a leak or mold. Everything on my end seemed fine. The smell persisted, though, a faint reminder that something wasn't right. One night, curiosity got the better of me. I was lying in bed, staring at the ceiling, listening to the faint dragging sound beneath me. My imagination ran wild with possibilities, each one worse than the last. Finally, I decided to check it out. Throwing on a hoodie, I crept down the stairs to the basement door. The hallway was dark, lit only by a faint night light near the kitchen. As I approached the door, the dragging sound abruptly stopped. I froze, my hand hovering inches from the doorknob. That's when I heard it breathing. Soft, shallow breathing, just on the other side of the door. I stood there, paralyzed, every hair on my body standing on end. The breathing wasn't labored or heavy, but it was unsettling, too calm, too close to the door, as if Aaron was standing there, listening for me. I backed away slowly, my heart pounding, and retreated upstairs without making a sound. I locked my bedroom door and lay in bed, trying to convince myself it was just my imagination. But deep down, I knew better. The following days passed in a haze of paranoia. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong in that basement. I thought about asking Aaron to leave, but there wasn't a logical reason to. He paid rent on time, didn't cause trouble, and technically hadn't done anything wrong. One rainy evening, I came home late from work. The street was flooded with puddles, and wet leaves clung to the tires of my car as I pulled into the driveway. That's when I noticed it. The small basement window was slightly open. Strange, given the rain. What really caught my attention, though, was the mud. Thick, wet mud smeared across the glass and the window ledge, as though someone had tried to climb in or out. My stomach churned as I crouched to get a closer look. Peering through the rain-streaked glass, I saw the dim interior of Aaron's apartment. It was nearly empty, save for a single mattress in the middle of the floor. And then I noticed the pile of clothes next to the mattress. At first, I didn't think much of it. But as my eyes adjusted to the dim light, I realized they were my clothes. A hoodie I hadn't worn in weeks, a pair of jeans that had gone missing from the laundry, even a shirt I'd worn just days ago. Cold sweat broke out across my skin. Why would Aaron have my clothes? What was he doing with them? I should have called the police then and there, but shock and fear clouded my judgment. Instead, I decided to look for more proof, something undeniable to confront him with. Circling to the back of the house, I crouched by a small window leading to the basement storage area. The faint glow of light filtered through from Aaron's apartment. What I saw made my blood run cold. Aaron stood in the middle of the room, staring at the wall. He wasn't moving, just standing there with his back to me. And the wall, it was covered in photographs. Dozens of them. They were pictures of me. Some were candid shots. Me getting into my car, taking out the trash, sitting on the porch with a book. Others were more intimate. Me sleeping, my face slack and unaware. The angles, they weren't from a distance. They were close, impossibly close, taken from inside my house. I stumbled back, nearly slipping in the mud, my hands trembling as I fumbled to dial 911. "There's someone in my house," I whispered to the operator. "I don't feel safe." They told me to stay on the line, but I couldn't just stand there. I ran inside, locking every door and window. I grabbed a kitchen knife and waited, my heart pounding so loudly it drowned out all other sounds. And then it hit me, the dragging noise. It wasn't furniture. It wasn't something innocent or explainable. It was the sound of bodies being dragged across the floor. It was supposed to be a fun getaway, a reunion with old friends, a chance to escape the grind of our everyday lives. We decided to revisit Camp Willow Creek, a place we'd all cherished in our youth. The nostalgia was palpable as we loaded the car with camping gear, food, and drinks, excited to relive old memories and create new ones. When we arrived, the camp looked much as I remembered it. The lake shimmered under the afternoon sun, and the air was filled with the scent of pine and earth. It was idyllic. We set up our tents in a clearing just off the path leading to the lake, joking and laughing as we unpacked. Sarah, one of my best friends, started telling ghost stories, and soon we were all swapping tales of eerie encounters and strange happenings. The mood was light and filled with laughter. That evening, we lit a campfire, the flames flickering and crackling as we settled in with snacks and drinks. The sun dipped below the horizon, casting a warm glow over the campsite. But as darkness enveloped us, an uneasy feeling began to creep in. The stories from earlier hung in the air, and I found myself glancing around, half expecting to see something lurking in the shadows. "I dare you to tell a real ghost story," Jake challenged, a mischievous grin on his face. I rolled my eyes. "You know those are just stories, right? They're not real." "Come on," he pressed. "We're out here in the woods. What's the worst that could happen?" Feeling bold, I decided to share a tale I'd heard years ago. "Okay, there's a story about a ghost that haunts these very woods. They say if you sit by the campfire at midnight, you might hear her call out." Everyone leaned in, intrigued. "What does she say?" Sarah asked, her eyes wide with curiosity. "She calls out for help. They say she was lost in the woods decades ago and never made it out. If you listen closely, you might hear her voice," I said, trying to sound mysterious. As the night wore on, the fire crackled, and the chill of the evening air settled in. We shared more stories, our laughter mingling with the sounds of the night, the rustling of leaves, the distant call of an owl. But as the hour grew late, the forest seemed to come alive in a different way. The laughter faded, replaced by an unsettling silence that thickened the air around us. "I think it's time to hit the hay," Jake finally said, breaking the tension. As we crawled into our tents, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. The darkness felt heavier, and the sounds of the forest seemed muted, as if the trees were holding their breath. I lay awake for a while, staring at the ceiling of my tent, listening to the quiet. Then, just as I was starting to drift off, I heard it, a faint whisper, like the rustling of fabric. I sat up, heart racing. Was it just my imagination? I glanced at the others, but they were all sound asleep. Shaking my head, I tried to dismiss the fear creeping in. But then I heard it again, clearer this time. A voice, soft and distant. "Help me, please." My heart sank. I remembered my story, the ghost. Could it be? Brushing it off as the wind, I lay back down, trying to calm my racing heart. But sleep eluded me. The voice came again. "Help me." Finally, unable to take it anymore, I decided to investigate. Crawling out of my tent, I was careful not to wake anyone. The campfire had burned down to glowing embers, casting a dim light over the clearing. I took a deep breath to steady myself and moved toward the trees. "Hello," I called out, my voice shaking. "Is anyone there?" Silence answered me, thick and oppressive. I shone my flashlight into the woods, the beam cutting through the darkness. The trees stood tall and silent, their branches swaying gently in the breeze. A chill ran down my spine, but I pressed on, convinced I needed to find the source of the voice. As I stepped deeper into the forest, a strange sensation washed over me, a mixture of fear and curiosity. The air felt charged, and the whispering returned, more urgent now. "Help me. I'm lost." I hesitated, fear gripping me. Was I really going to respond to a voice in the dark? Shining the flashlight around, my heart pounded. Then, out of the corner of my eye, I saw her, a figure standing among the trees. "Hello," I called again, my voice barely above a whisper. The figure didn't move. A chill crawled up my spine. My flashlight beam caught a glimpse of her pale face, her eyes hollow and distant. She looked lost, and my heart ached at the sight. "I can help you," I said, stepping closer. But as I approached, she faded into the shadows, her form dissolving like mist. Panic surged through me. Stumbling back, I tried to process what I had just seen. "Wait!" I shouted, but she was gone. The whispering grew louder, echoing through the trees. I turned to run back to the campsite, my heart racing. The darkness pressed in around me, the weight of unseen eyes heavy on my back. I burst into the clearing, chest heaving with fear. Rushing to Jake's tent, I shook him awake. "Jake, you have to wake up. Something's out there." He blinked, confusion in his eyes. "What are you talking about? Didn't you hear it? The voice. It was calling for help." Jake sat up, his face pale as he processed my words. "What voice? Are you sure you weren't dreaming?" "I swear it was real. I saw her. Jake. A woman in the woods." I stammered, my words tumbling over each other in panic. By now, the commotion had stirred the others. Sarah emerged from her tent, her flashlight casting shaky beams across the clearing. "What's going on?" she asked, her voice groggy but laced with concern. "I think there's something in the woods," I said, my voice trembling. "A ghost." She was calling for help. Laughter erupted, but it was nervous, almost forced. Jake tried to lighten the mood. "Come on, it's just a story. You probably scared yourself with your own imagination." But Sarah's expression grew serious. "If it's true, we can't just ignore it. What if it's, I don't know, someone actually in trouble?" A heavy silence fell over the group. Then, with a mix of fear and determination, we gathered flashlights and prepared to venture into the forest together. The woods felt different now, alive in a way that made my skin crawl. The trees seemed taller, their branches intertwining to form a canopy that blocked out the moonlight. Shadows danced at the edges of our flashlight beams, and the air was thick with an oppressive chill. "She was right here," I said, pointing to the spot where I had seen the ghostly figure. Jake glanced around nervously. "Are you sure?" "Yes, I saw her face. She looked lost," I replied, my heart pounding in my chest. We pressed on, the crunch of leaves underfoot and the occasional snap of a twig the only sounds breaking the eerie silence. The deeper we went, the colder the air grew, until our breath hung in white puffs before us. And then the whispers returned. At first, they were faint, like the distant rustle of wind. But as we moved further into the forest, they grew louder, swirling around us like an otherworldly chorus. "Help me," the voice pleaded, soft and sorrowful. Suddenly, Sarah froze, her flashlight trembling in her hand. "Do you hear that?" she whispered. Before anyone could answer, the figure appeared again, just beyond the reach of our lights. This time she was closer. Her pale face was streaked with tears, her hollow eyes filled with anguish. "Help me," she whispered again, her voice cracking with desperation. I stepped forward, my heart racing. "What do you need? How can we help you?" She shook her head slowly, her expression mournful. "You must listen, before it's too late." The air grew frigid, and the trees began to sway as if caught in an invisible storm. "What do you mean? What's going to happen?" I asked, panic rising in my voice. Her voice trembled as she uttered a chilling warning. "They're coming." Before I could press her further, she vanished into the shadows, dissolving like mist. An overwhelming sense of dread washed over me, and I turned to my friends, who stood frozen in fear. "We need to get out of here," I urged, my voice rising in urgency. But as we turned to leave, the forest seemed to shift around us. The path we had taken was gone, replaced by a maze of trees that loomed closer with every step. The whispers grew frantic, overlapping and rising to a deafening cacophony. "Run!" I shouted. We took off, sprinting blindly through the woods, our flashlights bobbing wildly. The forest was alive with sound, branches snapping underfoot, the cries of unseen figures echoing in our ears. We stumbled into the clearing, breathless and panicked. I rushed to the campfire, its embers still glowing faintly. "We need to leave. Now!" I yelled, fumbling for the car keys. Jake was pale, his eyes wide with terror. "What just happened? What did we see?" "The ghost." "She warned us," I said, my voice trembling. Before I could explain further, the air shifted again. A suffocating silence fell over the clearing, and the world around us seemed to freeze. Shadows began to emerge from the edges of the forest, swirling and solidifying into figures. They were everywhere, lost souls trapped in the forest's grip. Their faces were twisted in anguish, their hollow eyes filled with sorrow. "Help us," they whispered in unison, their voices a haunting echo. I felt a chill race down my spine. "We need to go. Now!" I shouted, grabbing Sarah's arm and pulling her toward the car. We ran as fast as we could, adrenaline coursing through our veins. The shadows followed, their whispers growing louder, filling the night with an overwhelming sense of despair. Reaching the car, I fumbled with the keys, my hands shaking uncontrollably. "Start! Damn it!" I yelled, finally getting the engine to roar to life. As we sped down the road, I dared to look back. The figures stood at the edge of the trees, watching us leave. Their expressions were a mix of sorrow and relief. The drive home was silent. No one spoke, the weight of the experience heavy in the air. I could see the fear etched on my friends' faces, and I knew none of us would ever forget what had happened. As dawn broke, the sunlight streaming through the car windows, I felt a mix of relief and sadness. We had escaped, but the haunting whispers lingered in my mind. Camp Willow Creek had its secrets, and we had uncovered just enough to know that some mysteries are best left undisturbed. Even now, I can still hear their whispers in my dreams. And deep down, I know the forest hasn't let us go entirely.